Please watch this.
Facing the most explosive conditions they've ever seen, firefighters are losing homes and lives across the West at historic rates, propelled by 45-mile-an-hour winds. Butte County's Bear Fire has claimed at least 10 lives, with 16 still missing. Visiting the scene of this unfolding catastrophe, California's governor sitting down exclusively with NBC News.
You've seen a lot of wildfires in your life. What do you make of the ones you've seen this year?
This is America fast forward. California, the west coast of the United States, that includes Washington and obviously Oregon, are experiencing what people predicted would occur in 2040, 2050, but we're experiencing it today.
California's nightmare now a searing reality for tens of thousands, with homes still in the path of flames. Among the nearly 30 major infernos that are out of control today in California, the Creek Fire near Fresno incinerated neighborhoods in minutes.
There is no downtime because Mother Nature doesn't give us that.
On the front lines, we saw firsthand why this blaze alone will threaten lives and property into the winter.
The lingering threat for firefighters continues nearly a week after this blaze first erupted. This is the problem. There is so much dry fuel here, the blaze could burn for months.
With California torching through its billion-dollar budget to fight fires, critics say the state isn't doing enough to suppress them.
We can get more aggressive. We can be more prescriptive, more targeted in terms of our vegetation management, forest management, our prevention strategies, land use strategies, our technologies on suppression, and our personnel in terms of pre-positioning a lot of our assets. But there is something so fundamental that also cannot be denied, and that is climate change.
It's not just California struggling to contain the flames. In Oregon, half a dozen towns decimated when walls of fire exploded over the region. Thousands of homes may be gone. Tonight, 500,000 people, or 10% of those who live in Oregon, have received evacuation alerts.
I know everyone's trying to save everything, but...
Tony Akpan and wife Robin tried to save their home and business, but lost it all. They took this video before they fled.
I just looked at the fire, and it's the first time in my life I felt defeated.
With the West choking in smoke, the air quality in cities across the region are among the worst in the world. The toxic haze blanketing skies as far as 1,000 miles away.
You don't need to be anywhere near this fire to actually be suffering from it. How worried are you about just the health conditions of folks in this state?
The air we're breathing right now is equivalent to smoking 20 packs of cigarettes. It is profound and consequential. The health impacts, strokes, heart attacks, respiratory issues. This is a challenging time, and we'll get through it.
Tonight across the West, lives and livelihoods are on the line as an unfolding disaster becomes a new permanent reality, engulfing the region in ways we have never experienced before. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News, the Sierra National Forest.
And as you just heard from the governor, this fire emergency is drawing new attention to the role of climate change in promoting conditions that fuel these kinds of blazes. Steve Patterson now with more on that from the fire zone.
The images are stark, the impact staggering. Wildfires across the West spreading, and scientists warn climate change is making it worse.
There is indeed a clear link between record heat and climate change.
And that heat creating warm, dry conditions for wildfires to explode. Right now, there are nearly 30 major fires burning across the Golden State. 6 of the largest 20 fires in California history breaking out this year. Adding to the record-breaking heat in bone-dry conditions, miles of dry brush and densely packed forest, a devastating cocktail stoking a historic outbreak of megafires.
There's a lot of dense vegetation buildup. The climate is warmer and more conducive to extreme fire behavior than it once was. And we also have a lot more people living potentially in harm's way.
In Southern California, officials say a 13,000-acre fire was caused by a pyrotechnic device used in a gender reveal stunt. This is the result. Acres of unrecognizable scorched earth, and in many cases, it starts with just a spark. In 2018, California's deadliest and most destructive wildfire in history, sparked by the state's largest power company. PG&E was found liable for not maintaining the forest around its electrical lines in a fire that killed 85 people. Experts say more than 100 years of overgrowth in some forests turn trees into matchsticks waiting to be struck.
So what we now have is too many trees in our forests so that when fires do occur, they burn bigger, hotter, and the impacts are dramatically greater.
Conditions have gotten so bad here in California that fire season is really all year round. It's why some experts say that prescribed burns can actually cut back on the amount of fuel and reduce some of these devastating fires. Lester?
All right, Steve Patterson, thanks. Tonight, a stark new assessment from Dr. Anthony Fauci on the COVID pandemic and when life as we know it might.
As the nation marks 19 years since 9/11 and the nearly 3,000 lives lost, it does so during another national emergency, a pandemic. Nearly 200,000 Americans now dead. And in the middle of a consequential presidential election, millions of Americans out of work. Today, President Trump and his opponent Joe Biden, aware of the gravity of this day.
We mourn deeply for the nearly 3,000 precious and beautiful souls who were taken from us.
I'm not going to be making any news today. I'm not going to talk about anything other than 9/11. We took all our advertising down. It's a solemn day. That's how we're going to keep it, okay?
At Ground Zero, Joe Biden meeting with victims' families, consoling this mother who lost her son.
Never goes away.
And crossing paths with Vice President Mike Pence, the rivals bumping elbows and greeting, both wearing masks. At the same time, President Trump on his way to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, pausing on Air Force One for a moment of silence. On the ground, he honored the passengers who so bravely fought back on hijacked Flight 93.
Our sacred task, our righteous duty, and our solemn pledge is to carry forward the noble legacy of the brave souls who gave their lives for us 19 years ago.
As Trump headed back to Washington, Biden was arriving in Shanksville, laying a wreath at the memorial and meeting with family members of those killed. And stopping by the local volunteer fire department.
Everybody smiling.
Politics muted today, but here in Pennsylvania, still in the background. The signs visible as we drove through this key battleground state. One Shanksville resident with this unmissable welcome for the president. And by late afternoon, Trump himself was back on Twitter, attacking Democrats.
And Mary Bruce with us live here tonight. She joins us from Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And Mary, I want to go back to those images from Ground Zero here in New York today. We saw Joe Biden there with Vice President Mike Pence greeting each other, the elbow bump. Of course, both wearing masks. And it really reflected not only the weight of this anniversary, but also the weight of this moment in the country, both of their wives right there, too. It would appear, though, tonight, President Trump has turned back the campaign.
Yes, and David, Trump will be back on the road in Nevada this weekend. The candidates are really ramping up their campaigning. Between them, they will be hitting 6 battleground states next week. They will both be back here in Pennsylvania, both also in Minnesota, and Biden visiting the key state of Florida. David, now with just 53 days to go.
All right, Mary Bruce with us tonight on this 9/11. Mary, thank you. And in the meantime, we turn to the coronavirus here in the U.S. and the new evidence from...
Without social distancing or masks.
Just because you're outdoors. President Trump once again ignored his own administration's guidelines on coronavirus, holding a rally in Michigan Thursday.
Complicated. Cam briefly dated a member of Gloria Stefan's band, the Miami Sound Machine. He doesn't talk.
See this drama play out much longer? Will these thousands of people be stuck on this island indefinitely?
Well, remember when the EU and Turkey reached an agreement in March 2016, the idea was this, that if people arrive on the islands, there would be a process to determine where they would go from the island. If they would be safe in Turkey and there would have to be an asylum procedure, they would be returned to Turkey. If they were not safe in Turkey, received refugee status and would stay in Europe, they would move to the mainland. At that time, there was also a process of relocating refugees from Greece to other European countries. Now, this is all broken down. The Turks are no longer talking.
I want to comment on what you're looking at right there. Unless you went outside camping for a while, it's one thing to sleep on the ground with air mattress, etc. It's another thing to sleep on concrete. That's exactly what those people are sleeping on right now. They're sleeping on hardcore concrete, which is very, very difficult to even think, to even imagine towards getting any sleep at all, much less drinking the water that they're drinking. But let's go back.
About migration with the Greeks,
The
not taking
migration problem has been a problem now for a few years, and it's one of the
Will these
most
these
horrible
thousands of people be stuck on this island?
horrible as humanitarian problem up onto this planet. Up until just recently, whenever we're seeing what we're seeing right now out west, pertaining to all the fires. These fires that are erupting are exceeding and excelling anything that has ever happened in the past 4 or 5 years since we've been documenting fires out west. California has now reached a fire exceeding like any other fire in their state ever as of today, that is still expanding and growing. In addition to them having, give or take, about 20 different fires. I know what I'm going to say is probably going to sound offensive to some. But whenever the white man, the European man, decided that he was going to come over here to America, and he was going to eradicate the red man, and as he was eradicating the red man, he was eradicating what the red man cherished, which was the great buffalo. The great buffalo that not only ate the vegetation, but kept the vegetation trampled down. Now we're seeing the true results of not only global environmental catastrophe, but now we're seeing the results towards what happened hundreds of years ago to this great country, to this great land. Because I truly believe if the buffalo was still roaming to this day, in which I realize it's impossible for the species to run wild, pertaining to us having all the automobiles and everything that we have today here in America. But if the buffalo was running wild like they was 300, 400, 500, 600 years ago, I truly believe that we would not be seeing this type of fires out west, because the buffalo would either eat the vegetation or keep the vegetation trampled down. Was there fires 400 or 500 years ago that was implemented because of lightning strikes? Well, sure it was. Absolutely it was. Don't sit there and try to convince yourself that it wasn't, because it was. But the vegetation was not nearly as plentiful as it is today. Why has the vegetation become so plentiful? It's because we have nothing now to maintain that vegetation, and that vegetation has grown wild for hundreds and hundreds of years over here, to the point that now, because of the environmental crisis that we're facing, adds insult to misery. Kind of like what we're looking at right now overseas, pertaining to the immigration humanitarian problem that we're seeing now on the other side of the planet. As we're ending on 9/11, there's never been a time that we needed to stick together and pray and try to solve some of these problems that are going on worldwide. And if it's not our water, it's our air. If it's not our air, it's our community. If it's not our community, it's the problems with the countries towards them not getting along and fighting and wanting to kill and wanting to destroy each other. I've never seen society so topsy-turvy the way that it is right now, simply because of the scriptures that reads that we will see these signs because of all the sin that humanity has brought upon to itself, that these are the beginnings of God's sorrows that will fall upon to humanity, even as a woman travailing towards bearing forth a child. That's what we're seeing, and it's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. As we end this program, good luck to all of us. As we say again and again, good luck to each and every one of us.
They would be returned to Turkey. If they were not safe in Turkey, received refugee status and would stay in Europe, they would move to the mainland. At that time, there was also a process of relocating refugees from Greece to other European countries. Now, this is all broken down. The Turks are no longer talking about migration with the Greeks. They are not taking back anyone since early March. The agreement is gone. So the big question is...
Last winter, I do want to comment on this. Last winter was one of the most miserablest scenes that I'd ever seen, towards a bunch of people starving to death, freezing to death, walling around in a bunch of mud and a bunch of weather that was not even fitting for hogs or dogs, much less people.
What's exactly the point of keeping these 12,000 people on an island where the population feels frustrated from years of being neglected, where there is a lot of tension and where there is no accommodation, if these people at the moment cannot be returned anyways? So the suspicion one must develop is that they are there under bad conditions to send a very simple and brutal message, which is stay in Afghanistan, stay in Turkey, stay in Lebanon, because it's better there for you than inside the European Union. Now that is, of course, not just immoral, it's illegal. It breaks the European Union's commitments to its own laws, to the Refugee Convention, the Human Rights Convention, and it explains the frustration of the villagers in Lesbos, around the camp, of the people on the island, and of the migrants, because it's not clear how long they will have to stay there. It's a bit like a Guantanamo for refugees.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Gerald Nass, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this evening. More than 500,000 people have been forced from their homes in the U.S. state of Oregon as firefighters try...
500,000. That's 500,000 people have been forced out of their homes in the state of Oregon. Listen to this.
To contain wildfires that are running out of control. Nearly 100 fires have been burning over the past few days. The affected area stretches 1,300 kilometers from Portland in Oregon to Los Angeles in California. Butte County is one of the worst hit regions in California. At least 10 people have died, and there are fears that death toll will rise. And in Oregon, the damage is widespread. Hundreds of homes have been razed to the ground. Many people will be returning to nothing but charcoal remains. Freya Cole has the story.
In the suburb of Salem in Oregon State, the sky turned orange. A warning sign of the danger beyond the city's boundaries. From door to door, police checked on residents, telling them to leave now before it's too late. 3 hours south in Jackson County, residents were urged to get out in a hurry, and it's lucky they did. All that remains of this neighbourhood are rows of homes in ruins. For some, the escape was frightening.
It was unbelievable. I never seen flames so tall. And it was hard to imagine.
Evacuation centres across the state are filling fast. Volunteers are doing what they can to cater for everyone. Authorities say they've never seen conditions so brutal. The fires are fast moving, fueled by dry land and fanned by strong winds. Across the western states, more than 100 fires are still burning. The death toll is rising, and with no rain on the forecast, the disaster is far from over. Freya Cole, BBC News.
Well, for more on why this is happening now, we can speak to Dr. Nina Oakley, a research scientist for Scripps Institution of Oceanography. Thank you very much for coming on to talk to us. Just talk to us a little bit about the factors that are behind the severity of these fires.
Right, so we've seen more than 3 million acres burn in California alone this year, which is the most acreage burned in a fire season in modern history, and we're still not through the fire season with possibly another month or two before we can expect sufficient rainfall to tamp down fire risk. And there are not just one, but several factors contributing to why we are seeing this now, and will continue to may see things like this in the future. So the factor of climate change, which is getting a lot of attention right now, does not cause the wildfires, but really stacks the odds in favor of these large and destructive fires that we're seeing. So we're already experiencing and projected to see more higher temperatures on average, more extreme heat waves, drier conditions, and more severe drought. And these factors contribute to the drying of vegetation, making it easier to ignite, or stressing the vegetation that makes it more susceptible to things like insect attacks that can kill the vegetation and increase fuels. Fire has also historically been suppressed on the landscape in California for the last century, allowing a buildup of fuels. And many of California's wildfires are ignited either directly or indirectly by human activities. And this includes things like arcing power lines, campfires that get out of control, fireworks, equipment operation, off-road vehicles. And California has seen an increase in population in general over the past few decades, and a notable
If I can
increase.
just jump in there, because you're talking about this factor that climate change may not be about causation, but correlation. And the human activity that you're describing, you live in California yourself. You've seen the damage that the fires have done. Just talk to us a bit about that connection that you see between that damage and what people can actually do now to limit this kind of incident.
Right, so it's tough to speak as a climatologist about what can be done. There are a lot of social, political, and economic factors that can impact what's feasible in wildland fire management. And from the climate change perspective, as I mentioned at the top of the conversation, we anticipate these higher temperatures on average, more extreme heat waves, more severe drought, all which continue to create these conditions favorable for wildfires from the atmospheric perspective. Projections also suggest a drying of the spring and fall seasons. And so then since we did have a few weeks ago a very rare lightning event that ignited wildfires, but most of our wildfires are ignited by these human activities, and the increase in population at the wildland urban interface it creates greater potential for these fire starts.
All right, we'll leave it there for now. Dr. Oakley, thank you so much for joining us, and do stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Well, do stay with us on BBC News. Still to come, ceremonies are held in the USA to mark the 19th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks.
Today, in a loud and a clear voice, enough of blood and tears. Enough!
The difficult decision we reached together was one that required great and exceptional courage.
Well, Britain's coronavirus epidemic is once more on the rise. For the first time since March, the R number for coronavirus infections has risen above the crucial level of 1, meaning that the virus is now spreading again. Well, that appears to be backed up by the latest daily figure.
We are living in such sad times. Such sad, sad times.
The US today to honor the almost 3,000 people who were killed on 9/11. The day's events began with the unfurling of the Stars and Stripes from the Pentagon, the site of the third aircraft collision. This was followed by events at Ground Zero. Due to COVID restrictions, the names of those killed were not read out live, but instead pre-recorded and broadcast during the ceremony. Finally, President Trump addressed the crash site of Flight 93, which crashed in a field in Pennsylvania after the passengers resisted the hijackers.
In the days and weeks after 9/11, citizens of all faiths, background, colors, and creeds came together prayed together, mourned together, and rebuilt together. The song God Bless America became a rallying cry for the nation. We were united by our conviction that America was the world's most exceptional country.
That was President Donald Trump speaking there at that ceremony. Do stay with us here on BBC News.
And that's going to wind it up here for today, coming from the Windmill Ministries at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. On this despairable day of seeing all the troubles everywhere, let us never forget. Let us never forget that there's a reason why all these things are occurring simultaneously at the same time. Good luck to all of us, and shalom.